Dozens of digital nomad visas will let you use your remote job to live abroad for a year or more, but many of them will never lead you to a second passport. I checked out 10 of the most popular programs, and I found that 4 of them are traps designed so the time you spend counts for nothing, and the other 6 can make you eligible for citizenship, but only if you know the rules going in. In this video, I'll show you which one is which and exactly what each one actually asks of you. The digital nomad visa boom that kicked off around 2020 created an assumption that any digital nomad visa is an easy way into a country, getting a head start on residency and even citizenship while you keep on working for your employer back home. Pick a country you like, get the visa, and the rest follows suit. But it doesn't always work that way. Most of these digital nomad visas are not residency permits in any legal sense. A few of them are built specifically so that the time you spend on them actually counts towards nothing long term. And the difference between those that work and those that don't comes down to a single question. Does this visa start your residency clock, or does it just give you somewhere to sit for a year? I've sorted them into 3 different groups. First, the visas that count towards citizenship. Then, the visas that count but carry a serious catch that you ought to know about. And finally, the visas that look like valid pathways, but are actually built to send you home with nothing. So first off, in the pathways that count, let's take a look at Germany. So Germany doesn't have a digital nomad visa per se, but it does have something called the Freiberufler permit, which means freelancer, which is a residency category that's been around for decades. And since Germany passed its Nationality Modernization Act in 2024, it's become one of the faster routes to an EU passport on this list. The Freiberufler is for what Germany calls the liberal professions, but that can include IT consulting, software developers, designers, writers, translators, architects, scientists, and a long list of other specialized work that requires certain qualifications or creative talent. Now, if your work is closer to trade or commerce, like running an e-commerce shop or running a restaurant, then you would need to look at another path which has heavier requirements. But the Freiberufler is the cleaner route for most remote workers. So the permit is issued for up to 3 years initially, and you can renew it as long as your freelance work stays stable. Then you can apply for German citizenship after 5 years under the reforms, as long as you can pass an exam in B1 German. Now, there's one rule that a lot of people miss about the Freiberufler. You can't just be a freelancer working for international clients. The German authorities want to see that your work meaningfully serves Germany, which usually means having 2 or 3 letters of intent from potential German clients before you apply for the visa. Now, if your entire client list is US or UK tech companies, and you have no plans to take on German work, then your application could fall apart. This permit is designed to attract people who actually integrate into German society, and just parking a laptop in Berlin for the sake of the lifestyle isn't going to qualify. Now, the next country in this chapter runs a similar route, but with easier language requirements. It also tightened up its citizenship rules earlier this year, so that is worth keeping an eye on. Next up, we have Portugal's D8, often known as the Portugal Digital Nomad Visa. This was announced in October 2022, and it's become the most popular digital nomad visa in the EU, with thousands of them issued so far. Now, the income requirement is a minimum of €3,680 per month. You need to apply at a Portuguese consulate for an initial 4-month entry visa, which you can then convert to a 2-year residency permit on arrival and then renew for another 3 years. Every year counts towards permanent residency at the 5-year mark. Now, the big change came on May 19th, 2026, when Portugal officially doubled its citizenship timeline from 5 years to 10 for most non-EU and non-Portuguese speaking country applicants. But permanent residency does remain at 5 years for the time being. But what matters most here is when the residency clock actually starts. Under the D8, the clock starts on the day your residency permit is issued. And that's important because people commonly assume that the clock starts on arrival or on the initial visa approval, but it does not. Every year on the permit counts 1-to-1 towards permanent residency. But if you have more than 8 months of total absence during the first 2-year permit, you risk resetting the clock. And the same thing applies during the 3-year renewal period. Now, Portugal still allows dual citizenship, and it still has a language requirement of A2 Portuguese, which is the most accessible of any pathway in this chapter. And yes, the 10-year clock is a lot longer than it used to be, but it does keep moving forward as long as you follow the rules. Now, one country in this chapter runs a clock half the length of Portugal's, but the rules for getting there just got a lot harder as of this January. Now, France doesn't have a dedicated digital nomad visa, but instead it has the Profession Libérale long stay visa plus the passport talent for higher income freelancers. And both of these function as remote work visas if you qualify, and both of them put you in line to apply for French citizenship after maintaining 5 years of habitual residence in France. Now, France has one of only 2 5-year citizenship clocks in this video. Germany has the other. That's about as fast as it gets here, but the requirements in France just tightened up this year. As of January 1st, 2026, 2 big changes kicked in. First off, the language requirement for naturalization was increased from B1 French to B2. Now, B2 is upper intermediate. It means you can hold a real conversation with native speakers, you can follow French media at normal speed, and read newspapers without reaching for a dictionary. Now, that is quite hard, and it's a meaningful jump up from B1. Secondly, France introduced a mandatory civics exam. The interview that used to be just a chat with the prefecture authorities has now become a 40-question multiple choice test where you need to get 80% to pass. And that covers French history, French values, institutions, and culture. Now, dual citizenship is permitted in France, just like Germany and Italy, and processing takes up to 18 months for most applicants. In terms of income thresholds, the profession Libérale visa varies according to region, so you have to look that up according to where you're interested in moving to, but the passport talent requires roughly 41,000 euros per year. And again, it's best to verify the current figures with reliable online sources. Now, there's one more pathway in this chapter where the clock is twice as long, but so far they haven't tightened anything up yet. Now, Italy's digital nomad visa became available in April 2024, and it's the slowest pathway in this chapter with a 10-year clock to citizenship, but it's also the one with the fewest catches. Now, the income requirement is around 28,000 euros a year, which works out as around 2,330 per month, which is the lowest of any major EU digital nomad visa. And the visa is valid for 1 year initially, and you can renew it indefinitely as long as you keep on meeting the requirements. After 5 years of continuous residency with at least 183 days per year physically in Italy, you can apply for permanent residency. And after you reach 10 years in total, you can apply to naturalize. The language requirement is B1 Italian, which is intermediate conversational level, and Italy fully recognizes dual citizenship, so you don't have to give up your existing passport. Now, just like Portugal, the 10-year clock is the real cost here. You're committing a decade of your life to a single country, and you have to spend most of it physically there to keep the clock running. That is quite a lot to ask of someone who could otherwise be hopping between countries on Schengen tourist days. But if your goal is an EU passport with no compromise on dual citizenship and no recent rule changes hanging over you, then Italy is probably the safest of the big 4 EU pathways, at least for the moment. So those are the 4 EU digital nomad visas that count towards citizenship. Each one asks for time, language, and physical presence. Now, there are 2 more EU visas that also lead to citizenship, but both of these hide a catch that a lot of people do not see coming. Greece's digital nomad visa was introduced in 2021, and the headline numbers are very appealing. You can apply for citizenship after 7 years, 3 years less than Portugal, Italy, or Spain for most non-EU applicants. And the income requirement is a minimum of 3,500 euros per month after tax. The residency visa itself is a 12-month single entry permit. When you arrive, you convert that to a 2-year Greek residency permit, which you can renew in 2-year blocks. So far, so reasonable, right? But the catch is in the citizenship law, and it has 3 layers. The first layer is the permit type rule. Now, the Greek Ministry of Interior's official guide on naturalization is pretty clear that holders of temporary residency permits cannot apply for citizenship, and the digital nomad permit is classed as temporary. So to apply for citizenship, you first have to convert your permit to the EU long-term residency permit, which in itself calls for 5 years of continuous legal residency. Now, the second layer is language and civics. The exam tests your level of Greek language at B1 level, along with history, geography, and civics. Now, don't underestimate this. You have to reach B1 in a language with its own unique alphabet that's spoken almost exclusively in Greece. That is no small undertaking. And the third layer is the wait. Once you submit your naturalization file, the Ministry of Interior has got 1 year to respond under the law, but in practice, the decision is taking 2 to 4 years. So that's 2 to 4 years on top of the 7 that you've already accumulated, suddenly making that timeline feel a whole lot longer. Now, the next country has a faster clock for some applicants and far less bureaucracy, but its catch is a lot bigger than any exam or waiting list. It asks you to give up something that you may not be willing to lose. Spain's digital nomad visa launched in 2023 as part of the startup law, and On most fronts, it's a pretty attractive package. The income requirement is a minimum of €2,800 a month for an individual, and the initial permit is good for up to 3 years, renewable for another 2. And depending on your exact situation, you could also become eligible for the Beckham Law, which lets qualifying applicants pay a flat rate of tax at 24% on any Spanish-sourced income for up to 6 years. Now, that doesn't always apply to the average digital nomad, but it's still worth knowing about. And after 5 years of legal residency in Spain, you can qualify to apply for permanent residency. And after 10 years, you can apply for Spanish citizenship. Now, Spain also offers a fast track, which cuts the citizenship timeline down to just 2 years for nationals of Ibero-American countries, plus Portugal, Andorra, Equatorial Guinea, the Philippines, and Sephardic Jews of Spanish ancestry. For those who qualify, that is one of the shortest naturalization timelines in the whole EU. So if you come from Mexico, Colombia, Argentina, Chile, or any of the other countries on that list, Spain is going to be probably the strongest deal in this whole video. But here's the catch, and it's a pretty big one. Spain doesn't allow dual citizenship for a wide number of applicants. The fast track for Ibero-American nationals comes with a dual citizenship exemption baked into bilateral treaties that go back for decades. But for everyone else, the rule comes from the Spanish Civil Code. And that means to become a Spanish citizen, you have to renounce your existing citizenship. Worth noting here that France joined the No Renunciation Group in 2022, so French nationals can keep their passport as well, although they still face the standard 10-year clock, not the 2-year fast track. But if you're American, British, German, Australian, or from any other non-treaty country, the day you become Spanish is technically the day that you stop being whatever you were before. The visa works, the 10-year pathway works, but the end result is a passport that may end up costing you the one you already have. Now, in practice, for some nationalities, this renunciation is more of a symbolic thing than a real one. For example, the United States does not recognize a declaration made to Spanish officials, so many US citizens stay US citizens in the eyes of the US and end up holding both. And Spain doesn't typically chase it, but it doesn't protect it either, and that's a grey area, not a guarantee. If an American does go the whole way and formally renounces their US citizenship, then there's a risk of the US exit tax kicking in, which can be 6 figures for higher net worth individuals. But that's a separate, deliberate step, and Spanish naturalization alone does not require it. So Spain's fast track for certain nationalities is one of the best deals in Europe, but for everyone else, the big question is whether a Spanish passport is worth the renunciation it asks of you. And that's a question really only you can answer. Spain and Greece are both real pathways with their digital nomad visas, but most ask for things that people don't see up front. So before I get to the digital nomad visas that don't even pretend to be pathways, let's look at a few things that not many people explain about these programs, and they're going to apply to every option in this video. The first is the difference between a visa and a residency permit. Now, a national visa, which is what some countries call a Type D visa, is an entry sticker in your passport. The residence permit that you collect on arrival is the thing that actually starts your residency clock for citizenship. People get these mixed up all the time. The second one is the 183-day rule. Now, many countries, the majority of those in the EU, treat you as a tax resident if you spend more than 183 days there in a year, and if it's considered your permanent home. You can easily cross that line without noticing, and it could have knock-on effects on your home country tax obligations. So plan for the tax consequences before you go, rather than leaving it too late, and definitely speak to a professional on this. The third thing to keep in mind is the maximum absence rules during the residency window. If you leave for too long during the 5-year window, and the clock resets. Now, Portugal allows 8 months of total absence during the first 2-year permit, and 8 more during the 3-year renewal. Italy uses similar limits, and these get checked at renewal time. The fourth thing to keep in mind is the variance in dual citizenship. Now, Italy, Germany, France, and Portugal all allow it, but Spain doesn't for most applicants, Estonia doesn't for naturalized citizens, and the Netherlands generally doesn't. So always check the rules for the country you're targeting and also for your own nationality, because some countries have their own individual bilateral treaties that change things. And the fifth one catches Americans out the hardest. Now, Dubai's local income tax is 0. But the United States is unique in that it taxes its citizens on their worldwide income, no matter where they live. But the tax-free salary you'd earn while living in Dubai isn't really tax-free. You'd still need to file with the IRS, and you still need to send FBAR reports if your foreign account balances cross $10,000 at any point in the year. So those are the universal rules which apply to every route I've covered, and to the 4 that I'm about to cover in the rest of this video. But the difference here is that the next 4 visas we're going to look at are designed so that no matter how well you follow the rules, the residency clock will never start ticking. These are the 4 traps. First up in the traps section, we have Croatia, which introduced its digital nomad visa in January 2021, and it was the first program of this kind in the EU. Now, on paper, it looks like every other residency clock rule I just covered ought to apply to it, but actually it doesn't. Now, here's the process. The Croatian Ministry of Interior issues a permit for up to 18 months. The income requirement is just over €3,600 per month, or €43,470 in savings. You can apply at a Croatian embassy abroad or in person at a Croatian police station if you can enter visa-free. The permit gives you Schengen mobility, an exemption from Croatian income tax on your foreign-sourced income, and the right to bring your family members to Croatia. But the trap is that the permit is not renewable consecutively. So when it expires, you have to leave Croatia for at least 6 months before you can reapply. But meanwhile, the Croatian law on foreigners requires 5 years of continuous residency with no more than 10 months of total absence to qualify for permanent residency. Let's say you spend 18 months in Croatia, you leave for 6, and you've already gone past the absence limit for permanent residency before you finish a single cycle. The maths just doesn't work. No matter how many times you reapply, the gap between renewals will always disqualify you. Now, Croatia's planners knew about this when they designed the visa. The 6-month exit requirement is what lets them keep the application process fairly light. By making sure no one could chain the permit into permanent residency, the government was able to skip the bureaucratic layers that longer programs still require. So, is Croatia a bad place for a remote worker? Well, not at all. If your goal is 18 months on the Adriatic, working for a US or UK company with no Croatian tax on your income, your foreign income, and then moving on, Croatia still offers one of the best deals in the EU. But the trap is only a trap if you walked into it thinking that you could start a citizenship clock. But there's one visa in this chapter that won't even let you change your mind. It's in the EU, the income bar is reasonable, but the rule that traps you sits in the legal fine print. Let's look at Hungary's White Card. Now, that's the digital nomad permit, officially called the White Card, and it was launched in 2022 as Hungary's pitch to the remote worker crowd. Income threshold is €3,000 a month, fairly low for the EU, and you need also €10,000 in savings for the financial means test. The permit is initially valid for 1 year, renewable once, for a maximum total stay of 2 years. And you get Schengen mobility and access to Hungarian banking. So far, this looks like a standard digital nomad permit with a low income threshold, but the catch is what makes Hungary unique. Now, white card holders are explicitly excluded from permanent residency and citizenship pathways. That part is quite widely known, but the same rule has a second part that is not so widely known. While you hold the white card, you cannot apply for any other type of residency permit. And even after it expires, you still can't apply for a different one for any other purpose. Holding the white card basically shuts off any other Hungarian visa pathways, including the golden visa, family reunification permits, standard work permits. They all get locked behind the same wall. If you did want to convert from the white card to, say, the guest investor permit, which does lead to permanent residency, then you'd have to leave Hungary, wait a while, and re-enter on a fresh application from outside the country. And family reunification is also blocked. If you wanted to bring your spouse on a white card, they would have to apply separately. And there's a reason for this rule. Hungary's government wanted a digital nomad program that could bring in income without creating any obligation to naturalize. And the result is a visa that's structurally airtight, and it does exactly what it says it does. But the trap is that people don't tend to read the part of the rule that explains what it doesn't say. So Hungary's trap is built into the law, but the next country's trap is in the marketing. This one has spent a decade branding itself as the most digital-first country in Europe. But its digital nomad visa doesn't really match that branding at all. Estonia's digital nomad visa was one of the first in Europe, and the country's reputation for digital-first government, e-residency, being tech-friendly, built an expectation that it would be one of the strongest and most flexible pathways in the EU. But actually, it isn't. It states plainly on the Estonian government's website that staying in Estonia on the digital nomad visa does not give the right to obtain Estonian citizenship or permanent residency. The digital nomad visa is officially classified as a temporary stay, which doesn't count to the 5-year requirement for permanent residency. Now, the income threshold is €4,500 a month gross, so it's one of the higher thresholds in Europe, and it's valid for up to 12 months. And after it expires, you have to leave and apply for a different visa type if you want to come back. And keep in mind that the e-residency program is a completely separate thing. It's a digital identity for online business and tax administration, but it doesn't give you any right to enter Estonia, live there, or count towards any long-term residency or citizenship clock. Now, it's also worth noting that Estonia generally does not allow dual citizenship for people who are naturalized. So even if you found another pathway and eventually qualified for permanent residency, you would be asked to renounce your existing nationality. So why is Estonia so widely recommended for digital nomads? Well, it's because its brand is well earned. The marketing works well, but the visa just does not deliver what some people assume it does. We've got one visa left in this chapter, and it's a whole different kind of trap. This one's not in the EU at all, but it also often gets talked about when people talk about the best digital nomad visas in the world. This is the UAE Virtual Working Program, launched in 2020, originally just for Dubai, but later expanded nationwide. And the headline benefit is what most people know about the UAE: zero personal income tax on foreign source earnings, and a 1-year residency visa that you can keep on renewing. In terms of income, it's a minimum of $3,500 per month dollars for employees, $5,000 a month for business owners, with at least 1 year of company ownership. The permit is valid for 1 year and renewable through a new application. So far, so familiar, but the catch is what the visa doesn't lead to. Now, citizenship of the Emirates is effectively closed to foreigners completely. It hardly ever happens. The government does grant naturalization in, narrow exceptional talent categories for people like Nobel laureates, footballers, or strategic investors, but it's totally at the discretion of the ruling families. And these are tiny numbers, and they're not open to ordinary applicants. So the usual routes that most countries offer, residency, integration, and time, does not exist here at all. Even the Emirates Golden Visa, which offers 5 to 10 year residency permits for investors, professionals, and high-income individuals, doesn't lead to citizenship. It's basically just a long-term residency permit that you can renew on the same conditions. So does that mean the Emirates is a bad place for a remote worker? Nope, not at all. If your goal is zero personal income tax, sunshine and hot weather all year round, and sophisticated infrastructure for doing international business, then you'll find that the Emirates delivers all of that. But the trap is in the comparison. Putting this virtual working program on the same digital nomad visa list as a Portuguese D8 or a Spanish digital nomad visa implies they're playing the same game, but they're not, and the UAE never offered citizenship to foreigners to begin with. So those are the 4 digital nomad visa traps. Each one is structured differently, but they share one thing: the time you spend on them never accumulates. Now let's put everything together to wrap up. Here's how to choose, framed against what you actually want. If you want a year working tax-free for an overseas employer and then moving on, Croatia, Estonia, the UAE, or Hungary all work as advertised. For an EU passport in 5 years, or eligibility to apply for one, you're looking at Germany or France. Greece is the minimum of 7 years route for those who are willing and able to learn Greek. Italy and Portugal will get you there in 10 years with a more accessible language requirement. And if you're a national of an Ibero-American country, or the Philippines, Andorra, Portugal, or Equatorial Guinea, then Spain's 2-year fast track is unmatched. You don't need everything figured out before you make a move. You just need to know which question you're answering. I've got a free comparison guide for this video, which covers all 10 visas side by side, with their income threshold, citizenship timelines, or otherwise, language requirements, and any dual citizenship rules. And you can grab that from the link in the description. If you found this video useful, please click like and subscribe to the Digital Emigre channel. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.